Hello and welcome to the Funeral Channel Network. You are listening to The Deep Dive. And today we are going on a journey that, well, it might just change the way you look at some of the papers sitting in your junk drawer. I'm your host, and I'm ready to unpack the hidden history in our everyday lives.
And I'm joining you to provide the context, the analysis, and hopefully a bit of foresight. It's really good to be here.
You know, it's funny. We spend so much time on this show talking about the industry, the trends, the business side of funerals. But today, we're zooming in, way in.
Right down to the micro level.
Exactly. We're looking at a specific object.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you, our listener, to just picture something with me for a second.
Okay, I'm ready. Set the scene.
You're at a service. It could be a church, maybe a funeral home chapel. You walk in, you greet the family, and someone hands you a folded piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a photo on the front, maybe some dates. You hold on to it, kind of tight during the eulogies. Maybe you even fan yourself with it if it's a bit warm.
You're reading the poem on the back while you're waiting for things to start. It's the guide for the day. It tells you when to stand, when to sit, what hymn is coming up.
Precisely. But then the service ends. You go home, you take off your tie or your dress shoes, you empty your pockets or your purse, and there it is, that program.
And this is the critical moment.
It is. Because for most of us, and let's be honest here, what happens next?
It goes into a drawer.
A drawer. Or a shoebox under the bed. Or maybe, if we're being really, really honest, it goes into the recycling bin.
And that's sort of the common life cycle of the funeral program, isn't it? We see them as ephemeral. They are functional items designed for a 2-hour window of time.
And once that window closes,
We assume their value has expired. We think its job is done.
But today's deep dive is based on this concept called the Family Legacy Project and the source material we're looking at. It just flips that idea completely on its head.
It really does.
The core argument here is that these modest pieces of paper, as the text calls them, are actually some of the most complete personal historical records a family possesses.
That is the aha moment we are aiming for today. That's the big shift in thinking. We need to stop seeing these as disposable itineraries.
Right.
And start seeing them as what they really are. They're condensed biographies. They're genealogical anchors.
I love that phrase, genealogical anchors.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, we obsess over Ancestry.com or 23andMe. We spend money to find out where we came from.
We do. We're desperate for those connections.
And at the same time, we might be throwing away the very map that tells us the story, a map we already have in our own house.
Precisely. So the mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly why these documents are historically critical. And we aren't just talking about sentimental value, though that is huge, of course.
No, this is about hard data.
It's about hard data. Unique data that literally doesn't exist anywhere else. And crucially, we're going to talk about the urgent need to archive them before they're lost for good.
And we're going to get practical, too. Later in the show, we promise we're going to give you the literal how-to. We'll talk about why you should never, ever laminate a funeral program.
Oh, please. If you hear nothing else, hear that.
It's a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
It is a disaster for preservation. And we'll cover how to digitize them so they can last, well, basically forever.
It's a complete shift in mindset. We're moving from just, keeping a souvenir to actually building an archive.
So let's start with that value proposition. Let's really dig in. Why is a funeral program more than just a piece of paper?
The source material makes a really interesting comparison here. It contrasts these programs with official records.
Right, and this is a key distinction. Think about the documents that the government generates when someone passes away.
Okay, like a death certificate? A death certificate, exactly. You might have a line in a census ledger from decades ago. Maybe a brief 2-line death notice in the local newspaper.
Very formulaic.
Very. They're bureaucratic documents. They are created by institutions, by the state, for the purpose of statistics or legal processing.
They're cold. They're just facts. Name, date, cause of death, end of story.
That's it. But a funeral program, that's a human document. It's created by the family, usually in a state of, deep reflection and grief.
It's not for a government file.
No.
Yeah.
It isn't written to satisfy a legal requirement. It is written to honor a life. And because of that authorship, because it's coming from the people who loved the deceased, it captures a richness that bureaucracy just can't touch. It's a totally different kind of record.
That's such a great point. It's a difference between knowing that someone died and knowing who someone was.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
Yes. The source material emphasizes that these programs document how they were loved, not just that they died. A death certificate will never, ever tell you that.
Never. Okay, so let's dig into this data goldmine, as the outline calls it. Because for the genealogists listening, or just the curious family historians out there is stuff in these programs you literally cannot find anywhere else. What should we be looking for?
Well, let's start with the most basic thing, which sounds simple, but it's often not. The
A
name.
name seems straightforward.
You'd think so. Official records can be surprisingly tricky with names. You might have Robert Smith on a birth certificate. Very official.
Okay.
But maybe everyone, and I mean everyone, in his whole life knew him as Bubba.
Right. And if you're a genealogist in 50 years searching for Bubba Smiths, you're going to hit a brick wall. There's no birth certificate for Bubba.
You find nothing. It's a dead end. But the funeral program, it'll almost always say Robert Bubba Smith. It connects the legal identity to the social identity, the lived identity, and that is absolute gold for a researcher.
That one little detail can unlock so much.
But it goes so much deeper than that. Think about the photos. A funeral program is often a visual history in itself.
Yeah, it's rarely just one picture, is it?
Very rarely these days. You often get a collage. A baby photo, a military portrait, a wedding photo, maybe a picture from a retirement party, or holding a grandchild.
So you're seeing a whole life in pictures.
You are. It establishes a visual timeline of what this person looked like and, just as importantly, how they presented themselves to the world at different stages of their life.
And military service is a big one mentioned in the text.
Huge. Absolutely huge. Official military records can be notoriously difficult to access. Or they might have been destroyed. There was a massive fire in the National Archives in the 70s that wiped out millions of Army and Air Force service records from World War I through the early 60s.
Wow, I didn't know that. So those records are just gone.
For many people, yes, they're gone forever. But a funeral program, it will often list the rank, the unit, the medals awarded, maybe the years of service and where they served. It puts that information right back in your hand. It can be the only surviving record of that service.
That is incredible. I was also struck by the mention of religious affiliations. You're not going to find that on a driver's license.
No, you certainly are not. And knowing someone was a deacon at First Baptist Church on Elm Street for 40 years tells you so much. It tells you about their community, their values, their weekly routine.
And it gives you another place to look for records.
Exactly. That's the key. If you know the church, now you can look for baptismal records. You can look for marriage records for their children. The program gives you the key to unlock those other doors that you didn't even know existed.
Okay, and then there's the cast of characters.
Yeah.
This is the part that I think people, myself included, probably overlook the most.
Absolutely. The list of pallbearers. The officiant. The people thanked in the acknowledgments. The honorary pallbearers.
What can that tell us?
That is the social network analysis of the pre-digital age. Think about it. Who carried the casket? Those were likely the deceased's closest friends, brothers, sons, nephews, or cousins.
Their inner circle.
Their inner circle. So if you are hitting a brick wall in your family tree, looking at the pallbearers can break it right down. You might be looking at the list and think, okay, I see his sons. But who is this James Wilson? He's not a brother.
And then you realize,
Oh, that must be Sarah's husband. He's the brother-in-law we didn't know about. You've just discovered a new branch of the family.
it really fills in what the text calls the emotional gap.
Yeah.
Public records are so hard, they're skeletal. The program puts the flesh on the bones. It provides the narrative.
It creates a bridge. When you read the favorite scripture that they chose, or the poem printed on the back, or you read the obituary narrative that the family actually wrote themselves, you're hearing their voice. You're getting a sense of their personality, of what mattered to them.
Let's talk more about solving mysteries. Because every family has them, right? The black sheep, the lost cousin, the confusion about who is actually related to whom. How does a funeral program act as, like, a detective's tool?
Because it's a primary source. That's the holy grail of history. A primary source is a document created at the time of the event by people with direct knowledge.
And in genealogy, one of the biggest issues is just inconsistency. Right?
It's a huge problem. The census taker in 1940 might have misspelled the last name. It happened all the time. The birth certificate might have a date that conflicts with the death certificate.
So when you have 3 different official documents saying 3 different things, the funeral program can act as the tiebreaker.
Often, yes, because it was created and verified by the immediate family at the time of death. They knew the correct spelling. They knew the actual birth date. It's often the most accurate record you have for that specific data.
But it solves even bigger mysteries than just typos. The outline points to maiden names.
Oh, that's the classic roadblock.
It really is. My wife has been trying to trace a line in her family and just hits a wall at a great-great-grandmother.
And that's so common. A woman marries, she takes her husband's name, and her entire history before that marriage can sometimes just vanish from the easily accessible records.
It's like she just appeared out of nowhere.
Exactly. But a funeral program in the obituary section almost always lists her parents. It will say, daughter of the late John and Sarah Miller. Boom.
You have the maiden name.
Miller. You have the maiden name, you have her parents' first names, you have just unlocked an entire previous generation that was invisible a minute before.
What about more complex families? You know, the reality of modern life is step families, adoptions.
Bureaucracy struggles with complexity. It really does. Government forms have boxes, and if your family doesn't fit neatly into those boxes, the data gets lost.
Yeah, there's no box for the neighbor who was like a son to him.
There isn't. But a funeral program, it has the flexibility to reflect reality. It lists stepchildren, it will list adopted children, or even, like you said, special friend or devoted caregiver.
The chosen family.
Exactly, the chosen family.
Yeah.
The people who were absolutely crucial to the deceased's life, but have no legal standing. They will never appear on a probate form. They aren't in the will.
But they're right there in the program.
They're right there, listed as honorary pallbearers or in the special thanks section. If you want to know who held that person's hand in their final years, look at the program.
I also love this idea in the outline about tracking migration. We tend to think of migration as these huge historic movements like Ellis Island. But families move between states, between cities, all the time.
This is the microhistory of migration. A program can be a map. For many families, particularly in the African American community, it can be a document of the Great Migration, but really for anyone.
So what would that look like?
A program might say, born in Tupelo, Mississippi in 1935. He moved with his family to Chicago in 1955 to work in the steel mills. He retired to Atlanta in 1990 to be near his grandchildren.
Wow, in one sentence.
In one sentence, you have just mapped the entire geographical history of a family line for the 20th century. It tells you exactly where to go looking for other records. You know to look for school records in Chicago, not Mississippi. You know to look for property records in Atlanta. It's a roadmap.
So we've looked at the individual, and that's already, that's huge. But the source material brings up a really fascinating point about microhistories. The idea that these programs aren't just about the person in the casket, they are about the entire community around them.
This is when you zoom out. You move from the individual to the collective. When you start to aggregate these programs, when you look at a collection of them, you start to see the history of a neighborhood, a church, or a civic group.
Can you give me an example of how that works in practice?
Sure. Let's take a specific church, say the AME Zion Church in a small town. If you, or an archive, collects the funeral programs from that single church over a 30-year period, you can trace the history of its leadership. You see the pastors change over time. You see the names of the choir directors and the organists. You can see when the church moved, if they built a new sanctuary, because the address will change. The programs, together, document the history of the institution itself.
Or organizations, like the outline mentions, veterans groups or fraternal orders.
Yes. If a program from 1965 lists that the deceased was a member of the local Masonic Lodge or the VFW Post 202, you are documenting the membership of those groups at a specific point in time.
You're creating a roster that probably doesn't exist anywhere else.
You are. And you're seeing who was active in civil rights involvement. We often see lists of affiliations that show deep community activism, things that would never be in a newspaper headline but were vital to the social fabric of that town. Membership in the NAACP or a local voter registration league.
It's like a window. You're not just looking at a portrait of a person. You look through the program, you see the entire world they lived in.
Exactly. You see the social fabric and cultural traditions too, naming traditions. You see how services are conducted, the songs that are sung over the decades. These are cultural artifacts. Archivists and historians are really waking up to this.
So they're actively collecting them now.
Yes, more and more. They're realizing that if we want to understand the social fabric of a specific time and place, we can't just read the newspapers or the official histories. We have to read the funeral programs of everyday people. That's where the real story is.
It's also interesting to look at the physical evolution of the artifact itself. The source material traces this history. It wasn't always a glossy, full-color trifold.
No, not at all. You go back far enough, say, early 20th century, and for most people, there were no programs. It was a verbal announcement at the graveside.
Or maybe a little mention in the church bulletin.
Exactly. Just a line in the standard church bulletin on Sunday. Our prayers go out to the family of Brother John, whose service will be on Tuesday. That was it.
So what changed?
Technology. As printing became more accessible and cheaper, the mimeograph machine in churches, then the photocopier, and then, of course, the explosion of digital printing, the medium itself exploded
So we went from a single sheet.
to a bifold, a folded single sheet, then trifolds. And now, in the modern era, we see these incredibly elaborate multi-page booklets that are more like magazines.
Full color, high gloss paper, multiple photos.
Professional design. And resources like the funeral program site have really driven this shift. They provide templates and guidance that encourage families to design with preservation in mind. The whole intent has shifted.
From here is the order of service.
To here is a keepsake, here is a document designed to last.
But, and this is the dark cloud on the horizon we have to talk about, just because they are designed to last doesn't mean they will.
This is the urgent part of our conversation. This is the call to action.
We have to talk about the threat of loss. Why do they disappear?
Well, the first and most obvious reason is the vulnerability of the medium itself. Paper is fragile. It is organic material. By its very nature, it wants to decompose and return to the earth.
So what are the enemies here? What is attacking our history while it's sitting in that drawer?
I'd say there are the big three: light, heat, and chemistry. First, the chemistry of the paper itself.
Okay.
Especially older programs, or those printed on cheaper paper, are full of acid. The process used to make cheap paper leaves acid behind. And that acid is what makes paper turn yellow and brittle over time. If you've ever touched an old newspaper and it just crumbles in your hands,
Oh yeah, it feels like a dead leaf.
that's the acid at work. And that is what's happening to these programs in a box in the attic.
And the ink, I assume that's vulnerable too.
The ink fades, especially if it's exposed to any kind of light. But even in the dark, certain types of ink can degrade and become hard to read. Then you have the mechanical failures. My personal pet peeve: rusting staples.
I've definitely seen that. The little brown stain that spreads out from the staple.
That rust is literally iron oxide, and it eats the paper. It creates a weak spot, and eventually the page just falls right out. And then there are the folds themselves.
The creases.
The creases. If you fold and unfold a piece of paper 1,000 times, what happens? It tears. These programs are almost always folded. That crease is a point of constant stress on the paper fibers. It's the first place they'll fail.
So there are all these physical threats.
Mhm.
But there's also what the outline calls the realization gap. This is psychological, not physical.
This is the human error component. It's maybe the biggest threat of all. The realization gap is the time between when you receive the program and when you finally realize it has immense historical value.
And how long is that gap usually?
Anecdotally, it's about 20 years, maybe more.
Right. At the funeral, you're grieving.
Mm.
A year later, it's just a sad reminder. It's just stuff.
And then you clean out the house after a move, or you're downsizing. You come across a box of them and you think, why am I keeping all this old paper? It isn't until you're 50 or 60 and you're trying to tell your grandchild about your grandfather.
And you go to look for it.
You go to look for it. You think, wait, that program had his military unit listed on it. And you have that sinking feeling when you realize, oh no, I threw that box away 10 years ago.
The source text has a great analogy. It's like throwing away the key to a treasure chest and only finding the locked chest 2 decades later.
That is a perfect analogy. And by then, the landfill has the key. The real tragedy is that we so often destroy these records right before we realize we desperately need them.
So let's stop the destruction. Let's get into the practical guide. We promised the listeners a how-to, and we are going to deliver. If I have a stack of funeral programs right now, what is the absolute best way to store them physically?
Okay, let's go into the do's. The golden rule of all archiving for any paper document is acid-free.
Acid-free everything.
Everything. You need acid-free folders or envelopes to put them in.
So why is acid-free so important? You said the acid destroys the paper?
Right. The paper itself might be acidic, but if you then store it in a cheap manila folder from the office supply store, that folder is also full of acid. It will actually leach that acid into your program and speed up the destruction.
So the container is contaminating the contents.
Precisely. You need archival quality sleeves or folders, and then you put those folders in lignin-free boxes.
Okay, you said that word before, lignin. What is that?
Lignin is a natural component of wood. It's like the glue that holds wood fibers together. But as it breaks down over time, it releases acid. So you want a box that is specifically made to be lignin-free, meaning that component has been removed. They're often called archival boxes or photo-safe boxes.
Okay, acid-free and lignin-free. Now, let's hit the don'ts, because I have a feeling a lot of people are guilty of these.
The biggest don't, and the one that seems counterintuitive, is plastic. Do not use random plastic sleeves like the ones you buy for a 3-ring binder at school.
But they look like they're protecting it. It makes it feel safe.
I know, but they are actually trapping it. Most cheap plastics, especially anything with PVC in it, will off-gas chemicals over time. And worse, they trap humidity against the paper. This leads to mold, or something called ferrotyping, where the ink literally lifts off the paper and sticks to the plastic.
Oh, that's a nightmare. So if you do use a plastic sleeve, it has to be a specific kind.
Yes, you're looking for archival polyester, polypropylene, or polyethylene. They're chemically stable.
Okay. And what about holding them together? No rubber bands, I assume.
Oh, please, never. Rubber bands dry out, they get brittle, they crumble, and they stick permanently to the paper. They also contain sulfur, which literally eats paper. And no paper clips. They rust, and they crimp and damage the paper fibers.
Okay, I'm taking mental notes. No rubber bands, no paper clips, no cheap plastic.
Right.
Now, where in my house can I put my archival lignin-free box?
You're looking for the Goldilocks zone. You want cool, dry, and stable.
Not the attic.
Absolutely. 100% not the attic. The attic can get to 120, 130 degrees in the summer and then freeze in the winter. That constant, extreme expansion and contraction of the paper fibers will destroy them.
And the basement?
Probably not. Basements tend to be too damp, and moisture is the enemy. It brings mold, mildew, and it attracts pests like silverfish insects that just love to eat paper and the glue in book bindings.
So where's the best spot?
A closet on the main floor of your house, somewhere inside your living space. The rule of thumb is, if the temperature and humidity are comfortable for you, they're probably comfortable for the paper.
That's a great, simple rule. Now, we have to talk about the controversial one, the one that everyone thinks is a brilliant idea, lamination.
I see this all the time. People bring things to archives they're so proud of, they've preserved them, they've laminated obituaries and programs. Please, if you take one single thing away from this episode, do not laminate historical documents.
But why? It makes them sturdy. It makes them waterproof. It feels like you're encasing them in armor.
Because you're sealing them in their own death chamber. Lamination uses high heat and adhesive to bond plastic to the paper. It is an irreversible process.
Irreversible. You can't undo it.
You cannot. First, the heat itself can damage the ink and paper instantly. But worse, over time, the plastic itself degrades. It turns yellow, it gets brittle, it cracks, and it releases chemicals that are trapped inside that plastic shell right against the paper. The paper will eventually turn to mush inside that plastic, and you can never, ever get it out.
Wow. So lamination isn't preservation. It's just a very slow, sealed up method of destruction.
It is. True preservation is about stabilizing an item and slowing deterioration, not fundamentally and irreversibly altering it. If you want to protect a document from handling, put it in an archival clear sleeve. That way you can always take it out if you need to. Lamination is forever.
Okay. Message received loud and clear. No lamination. Now let's move into the 21st century. Digital archive. Because even if we store the paper perfectly, a house fire or a flood could still take it all out in an instant.
Exactly. Digitization is your insurance policy. It's your off-site backup. It ensures longevity and, just as importantly, accessibility. You can't easily share the one physical paper copy with 50 cousins across the country.
But you can email a digital file to all of them in a minute.
Instantly.
So I've got a scanner at home. It's part of my printer. Do I just hit the green button and go?
You can, but you'll get much better results if you check your settings first. Resolution matters. A lot.
What should I be looking for?
You want a minimum of 300 dpi, which stands for dots per inch.
Why is 300 the magic number?
300 dpi is the standard for printing a replica that will look as good and as sharp as the original. But for archival purposes, I actually recommend 600 dpi.
Go big or go home.
You might as well. Storage is cheap these days. 600 dpi gives you flexibility. It allows you to zoom way in on a face in a group photo to see who it is, or to read a tiny handwritten note someone scribbled in the margin. High resolution captures the texture of the paper, the imperfections, the soul of the document.
And what about the color setting? Even if the program is just black and white text.
Yes, always scan in color. A black and white piece of paper isn't actually just black and white. The paper is some shade of cream or yellow or gray. The ink is a certain shade of black or sepia. Scanning in color captures the age and the true condition of the document. It just feels more real and gives more information.
And the file format. I assume I just save it as a JPEG.
JPEG is fine for sharing, for emailing to your cousin. But it's a lossy, compressed format. That means every time you open it and save it again, you lose a tiny bit of quality.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So for your master archive file, the one you're keeping in your digital vault, you want a lossless format. The gold standard is a TIFF file, or a high-quality, uncompressed PDF.
Okay, so TIFF for the vault, JPEG for sending on Facebook.
That's the perfect way to think about it. And scan everything. Don't just scan the cover and the inside text. Scan the front, the back, all the inside pages, even the blank pages.
Wait, why the blank pages? That seems like a waste of time.
You'd be surprised. Sometimes there's a faint watermark from the paper manufacturer. Sometimes there's an embossed seal from the funeral home. Sometimes there's a smudge or a note someone scribbled that you didn't notice at first glance. A true archival scan captures the entire object, not just the parts with text.
Now, you're about to call me out on my next problem. I scan something, and my computer names it scan00452.jpg. And 6 months later, I have absolutely no idea what that is.
You've just described the digital junk drawer. We all have one. You have to be disciplined with your file naming. Right away. Do not use the default name.
So what's the best formula?
A simple, consistent one is best, I recommend. Last name, first name, funeral program, year.pdf, for example. Johnson Mary Elizabeth Funeral Program, 1998.pdf.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Because then when you look at the folder, your computer automatically sorts them alphabetically by family and then chronologically.
Exactly. You can find what you're looking for instantly, even if you have hundreds of them. If you just have scan001, scan00, image053, you will never find anything ever again.
In organization, how should I structure the folders?
Consistency beats complexity. Don't make a folder structure so complicated that you hate using it and just end up dumping everything on your desktop.
Guilty.
A simple way is to organize by family line. A main folder for the Smiths, another for the Joneses. Or you could organize by generation or by region. Just pick a system that makes sense to you and stick with it.
This is all great, but we have to talk about backups. Because I've had a hard drive fail. It's a horrible feeling.
Digital failure is not a question of if, but a question of when. Your hard drive will fail. Your computer will be replaced. You need redundancy. The pros use the 3-2-1 rule.
Okay, break that down for us. What's the 3-2-1 rule?
It means you should have at least 3 copies of your data on at least 2 different types of media with at least 1 copy stored off-site.
So in practice, what does that look like for my funeral program archive?
Okay, copy 1 is on your computer's internal hard drive. That's your working copy. Copy 2 is on a separate external hard drive that you keep on your desk. That's your local backup. Copy 3 is in the cloud on a service like Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud, whatever you use. That's your offsite copy.
So if my house burns down,
Your cloud copy is safe. If your cloud service gets hacked or goes out of business,
my external hard drive is safe.
exactly, you're protected. And the outline adds a really nice human touch to this. The shared copy. Yes. This is a crucial step. Give a copy of the files on a flash drive to a trusted family member, a sibling, a cousin. Because if something happens to you, who has the password to your cloud account? Who knows where that external hard drive is? Sharing is a form of succession planning.
That transitions perfectly into our final big section, legacy, ethics, and education. Because what is the point of saving all this history if we don't share it and pass it on?
Preservation without access is pointless. Digitization is what allows for thoughtful sharing. You can upload these scans to digital family trees on sites like Ancestry. You can build a memorial website. You can, as we said, email them to family.
Oh, I love the idea of reprinting them for a family reunion.
It's a wonderful idea. You pass them around. It sparks conversation. Oh, I remember that service. Look at how young Uncle Joe looks in that picture. I completely forgot he was in the Navy. It brings the history out of the box and into the room.
But there are ethics here, right? Privacy is a concern.
There are. Sometimes programs can contain sensitive information. Maybe a family dispute is hinted at in the list of survivors or who is not on the list. Maybe there are home addresses or phone numbers listed that shouldn't be made public on the internet.
So you have to make a choice.
You do. You have to decide what stays private within the family and what can be shared publicly, and you have to plan for succession. Who inherits the digital files? Who becomes the next family archivist?
The digital executor.
Exactly. Someone has to be designated to take over the archive.
And let's talk about teaching the next generation, because, frankly, my teenage nephew might not care about a piece of paper from 1990. How do we bridge that generational gap?
You have to make it relevant. You can't just hand them a box of old papers and expect them to be fascinated. You have to tell the story.
So storytelling sessions.
Yes. Don't just give them the file. Sit down with them with the program on the screen or in your hand.
Hmm.
Point to the photo. Say, this is your great Aunt Sarah. Look at her nurse's uniform. She served in a field hospital during the war. She was incredibly brave. Use the program as a prompt, as a visual aid for the story.
You're giving the document context.
When you attach a story to the object becomes valuable to the child. The outline has a great quote. When context is passed along with documents, history remains alive rather than static.
Without context, it's just old data. With context, it's a person.
It's a person.
Yeah.
It's family.
And interestingly, the source material loops all the way back to the beginning, to the creation of the program. It talks about design as preservation. This brings us back to resources like the funeral program site.
It's a fascinating, self-fulfilling prophecy. If a program is designed well from the start with beautiful typography, clear, high-quality photos, balanced layouts, it's not only physically easier to read 50 years later,
It's also just more pleasing to look at.
it's aesthetically pleasing, and people are psychologically less likely to throw away something that looks beautiful and feels important.
So investing in a good design up front is actually an investment in the document's long-term survival.
Absolutely. Intentional design signals value. From day one, it says, this person mattered, and this document that honors them matters.
We have covered so much ground today, from the junk drawer to the cloud, from paper chemistry to family history.
It's been a real journey from the intensely physical to the deeply philosophical.
Let's try and recap the big ideas. We started with a common misconception, that funeral programs are just disposable guides for a service.
And we discovered they are so much more. They are, as we said, historical documents written in the language of love. They capture the data, the emotion, and the community context that official records always miss.
They speak when the voices are gone.
And they connect generations across time.
So here is our call to action for you, the listener. When this episode ends, I really want you to do this. Go to that drawer, you know the one I'm talking about, or open that old family Bible where you've tucked things away. Find the funeral programs.
Take them out. Don't just glance at them. Really look at them. Read them. See what names and stories you've forgotten. And then make a plan.
A simple plan.
A simple plan. Get one acid-free box. Start scanning one program a week. If you need help creating new ones for the future or just understanding how to design for preservation, check out the funeral program site. It's a fantastic resource for all of this.
Don't let that history fade. Don't let the paper crumble into dust.
Because preserving them isn't just about looking at the past. It's an act of foresight. It's a gift you are giving to the future.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We sometimes talk about the first death being when the heart stops beating. And they say the second death is when someone speaks your name for the very last time.
That's a powerful concept, a sobering one.
These programs, in a way, they are the anchors that prevent that second death. They keep the names, the faces, the stories alive on paper, ready to be rediscovered. So if we let them fade, if we let them crumble, what happens to our collective history? If the memory is lost, was it ever really there?
That is the question, isn't it?
Preserving these papers is how we answer with a firm yes. Thank you so much for listening to this deep dive on the Funeral Channel Network. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.